President Biden met this week with leaders of Japan and South Korea for their first Camp David summit of his presidency. The trio announced their intention to hold trilateral meetings aimed at strengthening alliances in the face of mounting tensions with China and North Korea. The leaders pledged to hold military exercises together and share missile warning data on North Korea. Also this week, Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy unveiled his foreign policy vision at the Richard Nixon Library. In a wide-ranging conversation with Simone Sanders Townsend just hours before that speech, Ramaswamy expressed opposition to multilateral agreements like the Biden administration has made and emphasized his nationalist approach to protecting U.S. interests. Here's their discussion for this week's On the Ballot series.
You talk about reducing economic independence on China through what you're calling stronger relationships with other Asian countries like India, like Japan and South Korea. Isn't what you are describing similar to the Indo-Pacific framework that the Biden-Harris administration announced in 2022?
No, I think that's actually loaded up with a lot of other orthogonal goals like climate change that have nothing to do with my objectives. I want strong bilateral trade agreements with Japan, with South Korea, with even India. These are countries that actually have strategic interests that are aligned with ours if we're able to deal with them bilaterally. So these multilateral agreements end up with a lot of bureaucratic nonsense in them. But I think those bilateral agreements will focus on reducing our economic independence on China itself. That's where my focus is. And I think if we're serious about declaring economic independence from China, it is going to involve real onshoring to the United States, which I'm absolutely in favor of. But if we're serious about doing this in a relatively short time horizon, as I am, it will require allies around the Pacific, including India and South Korea and Japan in particular.
I just want to follow up on that, sir. The countries that you named, India and South Korea and Japan, they are part of the Indo-Pacific Alliance. So is Australia, Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore. I can go on. I think all the countries together account for about 40% of the world's GDP. And the pillars say that they are about trade, the pillars of the framework, the supply chains, a clean economy, fair economy. Is that not what you're describing?
The clean economy, fair economy is just a nice-sounding buzzword for agendas that are actually hostile to, for example, carbon emissions in the United States. So I am a big fan, Simone, of abandoning the anti-carbon cult that's shackling the United States, while actually being much lighter on other countries who are on the other side of those trade relationships. I personally believe we need to abandon the cult of climate change in the United States altogether. That is shackling the United States while leaving nations like China untouched. And that's what you get in these multilateral bureaucratized arrangements. I'm deeply skeptical of multilateral agreements that the U.S. should enter. I think our relationships with our allies should be bilateral with each nation without these transnational climate and other unrelated standards that find their way into these trade agreements.
Ukrainian leaders, including parliament members that I have spoken to, have told me directly that when it comes time to negotiate with Russia, they will accept nothing less than full sovereignty to end Russia's war in their country. Now, your plan allows Russia to keep the territory that it has seized in Ukraine. But the war can't end without Ukraine, right?
Well, to be clear, Ukraine is like a client state of the United States right now. We are literally paying their government employees. The people who work in the bureaucracy of Ukraine's government are paid by U.S. taxpayer dollars today. And so I do think the U.S. is in a position to determine how this war comes to an end. Here's how I would do it. The deal with Putin is this. We freeze the current lines of control, the same way the Korean War ended. It's a Korean War-style armistice, a further commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. But in return, Ukraine does come out with its sovereignty intact, not without parts of the Donbas region, but the rest of Ukraine comes out with its sovereignty intact. But most importantly, I will require Vladimir Putin to exit his military partnership with China. The China-Russia military partnership, that alliance, is the single greatest military threat that the United States faces today. And I think it is shameful that neither politician in either party is actually talking about it.
Mr. Ramaswamy, I want to talk about the debate. The first Republican presidential debate is on August 23rd. You have qualified for that debate stage, and I would note the second debate as well. How are you preparing for the first debate?
Well, I'm traveling 8 states in the 7 days leading up to the debate. I want to be careful not to over-prepare. I've been at my best in this campaign. The way we've been running this campaign is by speaking the truth in a way that is unconstrained by the members of the donor class or the political consultant handler class. My bet is that's going to be a competitive advantage on the stage, but the truth is that every other candidate in this race has been a professional politician for a long time. They've been in professional political debates and primaries and general elections before. I haven't. And so I view the first debate as a bit of a warm-up. I've qualified for the next few. We're doing great in this race. I think my honesty and transparency and the fact that I'm actually able to speak freely in a way that many other established professional politicians aren't, that's my competitive advantage.
You know, you talk about your campaign. I think I've just heard a preview of your debate strategy. You talk about your campaign travel. You've spent about 19 days campaigning in Iowa, 15 days campaigning in New Hampshire, only 3 days in South Carolina, but you've appeared on more than 70 podcasts. Is this your strategy to reach voters?
I'd say our strategy in this campaign is talk to everyone. I'm not running to lead a political party. I am running to lead a nation.
Well,
and so I've gone to places where people don't go.
You are running to lead a political party. You're running to be the Republican nominee for president.
I'm running to lead the United States of America, actually. I'm running, but this is really important, Simone, is the way that I'm running this primary is a little bit different than the other candidates, because I'm already planning for our ultimate destination, leading a national revival. I was going to mention, I've been to the south side of Chicago. I've gone to Kensington in the middle of Philadelphia. These are places where any Republican politician or consultant would tell you, you'd be crazy to waste time there in the middle of a primary. I don't see it that way. Many people might even say that about coming on MSNBC. There are other candidates who have said that they won't talk to NBC News because NBC News is not nice to Republicans. My view is if I'm not willing to sit across the table from folks like you, I'm not ready to sit across the table from Xi Jinping. And I believe I am, but which is why we talk to all Americans first.
I think I reject the comparison. I think I reject the comparison of me to Xi Jinping. I want to ask you. You talked about climate change a little bit earlier, and I want to ask you about Maui. There's still a lot of questions about the government's response to the deadly wildfires in Maui. You released a statement this morning blasting people you say that delayed the approval of extra water to fight the fires, and you link that to what you're calling the DEI agenda. So you think DEI is responsible for wildfire deaths in Maui?
I think a big part of, sadly, what is responsible for those deaths, and my heart goes out to those people. I think it is shameful that the Biden administration has not done more, that they'll do more for Ukraine than they're doing for our own fellow Americans in Hawaii right now. A president who has not even showed up in Hawaii since that catastrophe. I think that's shameful. But the reality is, what did contribute to those deaths, and this is a hard truth, is the delay in providing water despite multiple requests that were made for access. And the person who was stonewalling it is an Obama appointee who has a worldview that is belief based on water protection. It's a climate activist. And so I think it's a sad story.
Mr. Ramaswamy, I think we could do this all day. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.